Hello wonderful people, it's Wild here. Today I'll be showing you how to decorate a mushroom mansion, and these tips can apply to any cottagecore or medieval style build you might be tackling. I'll show you how I go about decorating this space and share with you some tips, tricks and ideas so you can come up with an interior design that you love. The first thing you want to do when working on an interior is to divide up your floors. So I'm on the lowest floor here, and then I've added in a roof which is also the floor for the second story, and then there's a third story above it in the attic. And you can see that I have used these logs and slabs to create a beamed effect. Then, once you've got a space like this and your levels marked out, you need to start putting in your walls. Now I know that I want to have a hallway as I come in from the door here, and then I think this bottom story is going to be a nice place to have a living room, a kitchen and a dining room. So I'm going to use some more spruce logs to add in some posts to keep in with the design of the house. I'll use the same materials for the interior wall on each level. So on the upper stories where we have more of the sandstone look, I'm going to be using those instead. And once those are placed in, you can also start thinking about lighting. I'm going to be using torches and lanterns on this floor so I can start adding those in. I'll use this space here to create a staircase, and then I'll continue my planning of rooms as I go up layer by layer. But let's look at how you might decorate these spaces once you've got a layout that you're happy with. I've come out to the front of the mushroom mansion here so we can walk inside and you can get a real good feel for the flow. Let's head on in and look at the decorations. As we come inside, we've got this first area which is our hallway, and it's connecting us to the stories above. So I've used a staircase and I've spiraled around another post, but we'll head upstairs in a little bit. I've used this little alcove behind the stairs to place in a book, and I've made my entryway inviting with some pot plants and some artwork above the doorway. Now if we turn towards the left, this is where I've decided to place my kitchen, eat-in area, and then a small living area. Let's get an overview of this kitchen space. You can see I have all the practical elements for a kitchen, including an oven and stove, a sink, some cabinetry, and then I've gone with an L-shaped design using a peninsula. Not only does this allow me space to put some decorations like these candles and this cake, it allows for some more seating space and it gives the kitchen a really enclosed, cozy feel. Walking into the kitchen, you can see I've used some signs and some barrels to create the design of the cabinets, and I've put in some floating shelving. Now you'll see throughout this build that I've used some turtle eggs as decorations, as well as lots of pot plants and sea pickles, as well as some other items to place on the shelves. There's some of those sea pickles up there. Turning around and looking from the kitchen through the rest of the space, you can see how we've got a small dining area located off the side of the kitchen. And I've used this space over here to build a grandfather clock. These built elements are really important to adding interest to your space. And then off in this little alcove here, I've created a small living area. One thing that's important to keep in mind is the colour scheme. So here you can see the colour scheme encapsulated in the cushions on the couches. We've got red in the mushrooms, the green in the moss, and then I've brought in some pink to give me just an extra pop of colour, and it ties in well with the greenery we've used throughout the build, which is the azalea bush with these pretty flowers. Remember, there are tutorials for many of the furniture items and banners seen in this build, so check out the description for how to build them. Now let's walk back through the entryway into the next room of our build, and this is a dining room. I'm going to get a bird's eye view for a best look at this. You can see that the center feature of this build is a large dining table, and I've created some unique chairs using jungle wood. These have a more grand feel than in the small dining room in the kitchen, making this room feel a bit more special. But I'm keeping the same color palette flowing throughout the build so it all feels cohesive. You'll notice I'm using 3 different wood types here. I've got the dark oak wood, the jungle wood, and then spruce throughout the build. Now I'm using the jungle wood as a pink toned wood. If you're going to be playing in a 1.20 update or further, you could easily substitute this out for cherry blossom. It would look wonderful. Let's head upstairs. You can see at the landing I've placed this little table here as well as some artwork, and I've used another banner design just to add a little bit of extra interest, so I'm just not using the regular Minecraft paintings. Now on this side of the build, I've created a large living room space with a cozy fireplace. You can see I've kept the same chairs as we have downstairs. That continues the flow of the build and makes everything look cohesive. For the fireplace, I've used stone brick, which ties in with the stone that we've got downstairs, or you could use regular brick, which has a great red coloured texture, which works well with the mushroom blocks. For lighting on this level, as well as these wall sconce torches where I've used some nether brick stairs to create a subtle heart design, I've also added in some lighting hidden in the beams tucked behind these trapdoors. Now I've used yellow frog lights, but you could use glowstone or another coloured frog light. Looking at this floor from a different angle, you can see the small office space I've put towards the front of the build here. And I've used 2 pot plants to create just a little bit of separation between this space and the living room. Remember, you don't always have to use walls to separate. You can see I've got 2 walls on this level, one on either side, but those are separating some bedrooms, spaces that should be separate. But for a section like this where one flows into another, it's nice to have an open concept feel. Over here in the office space, I've created a built-in desk with some shelving here with some bookshelves, and I've used some scaffolding to create a small table. I really like the texture this gives, and the thin legs keeps an open look to the space. You can see I've used it over in the living room as well. Now let's check out these 2 doors that lead to the bedrooms. We've got a smaller bedroom over here towards this side of the build, but let's check out the master bedroom first. So since this is the main bedroom of the build, I've gone with the double bed, and I've used some jungle wood to create a really interesting frame. Once again, you can see the scaffolding coming into play here, making a great side table, and I've put some flowers and candles of mine. Artwork is a really important part of a build, so I've got lots all throughout the build. Not only can you use paintings and banners, but item frames with things that match the theme of your build and the colour scheme work really well as well. If we turn around, I've got another built piece of furniture here, and it's a small vanity. So I've used these sea pickles here. I think they look like product bottles, and then I've used a banner to create a mirror. If I turn around once more, I've created another furniture piece here using a bookshelf. I've taken advantage of the wall space behind this shelf so that I can have this multi-dimensional design using both the bookshelves and some shelving where I can place some items like this mushroom in a pot and this lantern. As we wander over to the other side of the build to check out the second bedroom, I want to point out the railing here. I've used these trapdoors to create the railing around my staircase, and I've made sure I place them on the block that actually goes above the staircase walkway. So if you see as I come down, I can look up and see the edge of the trapdoor. That means that when I'm up on my second floor, I can place items in this space here, like I've got this planter. And I've done the same thing over here in the walkway towards the bedroom, keeping this trapdoor on the inside block, that way we have more space, since you're not really going to bump your head much walking up the stairs. Alright, on to the next bedroom. So since this is a smaller room, I've gone with a single bed here, but I have got plenty of room to add in a wardrobe. I've got some barrels here at the base of the wardrobe, and then some jungle wood doors, and you can see just a hint of the armor poking through. Not only is this pretty, but it is practical storage too for your items like your armor and your leather clothing. I've kept the shelves going throughout this build. I think adding these shelves is a great way to add interest, and you can put all sorts of decor on top of them. Now let's go check out the third floor. Now of course you could always add in a continuation of the spiral staircase to access the third story, but I've gone with a ladder as it does allow for more floor space upstairs and it makes sense for an attic space. Let's climb on up. When we enter the first space here, you can really get a feel for the height of the roof of this build, and I've made the most of it by adding lots of shelving and artwork to this first wall you'll see, as well as the wall to the adjacent side here, where we've got a big glass window looking out towards the beautiful scenery. Now this is purely decorated space with a little sofa setting as well as some furniture. But if we come round looking from the other angle, you can see I've also built in some storage into this pretty shelving here. And if you're in survival, you could always make the rest of the floors more practical by building in more storage. Although up here, I've got some practical elements built in throughout the space. You can always extend the storage upwards, but keep in mind if you're in survival, you've got your height reach limit, so you don't want to place your chests up too high. I've got a couple rooms coming off this main room. One over this way, then I've got a little corridor room, and then a room behind this wall. So let's have a wander around and check out what each space is for. Through this door, first I've created a cozy library. I've lined both sides of the walls with books, and on this side I've created the look of a rolling ladder to access the books on the top shelves. I've tucked a little lectern in here. I like how this breaks up the bookshelves, and the larger book really showcases what this space is for. Of course, we've got some seating carrying through the design from the rest of the build. And then I've placed in my enchanting table here, and this is going to give you some pretty good enchants with all the books around it. Once again, I've got my shelving, but I brought in some brewing stands here. Not only are these useful, but they look really cool in this kind of academic looking space. One thing you can see I have done is add in these beams. Now these beams actually connect up to each of the gables on the roof of this build, and you can see there's a large one running along the whole length of the build as well. Not only can you hang lanterns from them, like I've got here, but having these structural elements adds some character to your build. I'm back in the main room of this floor now, so let's see what's behind this arch. One thing to keep in mind is you don't have to separate rooms with doorways. You can create little arches like this. That way there is some separation, but still the open flow. So in here, I've got my little map making setup, and I've added just a little bit of furniture like a seat and a little bench with a pot plant. The map making bench, or the cartography table, has got this dark oak wood texture, which works really well with the dark oak we've been using for the furniture throughout the rest of our build. But if you're not using dark oak for your build, you could easily disguise this by placing a trapdoor in front. This is just a hint at the practicality that's going to be behind the next set of archways, and I've included this skull here. Perhaps this is a relic gathered on one of the adventures followed by this map. Alright, let's head into the next room. In here is where I've got all of my practical items. I often build houses like this in survival and have all of my practical items grouped together in one room. That way you can still have fun decorating the rest of your floors. You'll have noticed that in the kitchen we had some of the furnace type items, as well as an anvil and other creating blocks, but up here we've got all of the ones you could possibly need. I've gone with this workbench design, using the space, which is quite large, to have several rows of features. And I've gone with a more rustic design for these furnaces. Of course, if you're in survival, you could omit these stairs here and just have a full bank of furnaces for maximum smelting power. You could also integrate some more furnaces on this side, but I've gone with an open bench style, and instead of using the dark oak like we've used on other floors, I've used this smooth stone, which I think works well for the industrial feel of this space. If we look up, you can see I've created a little mezzanine floor using these trapdoors. That means I can head up my ladder here, and I've got even more storage. Now you could bank these chests up and really make use of the space here. And remember that this beam isn't actually structural, so you could even put some chests in this space here. Now, although this creating a crafty room is a functional space, I still wanted it to feel like it fit the rest of the build and to have some pretty elements. So you can see I've carried through the decor with the sea pickles and turtle eggs, some candles and flowers, and I've kept the same color scheme with the red, green, pink and white. Now, a room like this with its crafting and utility capabilities can be fun to include in creative as well. While you might not need it, it really gives your build a lived-in appearance. If you are in survival and need more storage space, don't forget about adding in a basement. I'm back down here on the bottom story, and you can see behind me there is a space next to the table where I could easily add in a ladder to access a little basement. And remember, you don't have to stick to the footprint of just the build when creating your basement. You can expand out as far as you want to have unlimited storage capabilities. So here are my big tips to include when working on an interior, especially one that's as big as this mushroom mansion. You want to make sure you're using classic elements to define each space. So here in the kitchen, I've got the stove and the sink. Over in the dining room, we've got dining chairs and a dining table. And in the living room, I've kept things cozy with a fireplace and some seating. My next tip is to choose a color scheme and stick to it. You can see that all the decorations in this build stick to the same color scheme, and it makes everything feel cohesive. My third tip is to not be afraid to really fill up your space. Having lots of items and built furniture in your space gives the eye lots of things to look at and makes it fun to explore your build every time you go in it. My next tip is that artwork is key. Don't forget to add things to your walls when decorating your space. You could use item frames, paintings, or create your own banners like these ones I've got here. And my final tip for creating an interior you'll love is to get creative. Use blocks in ways that you wouldn't normally think, like how I've got the planters over there using the composters. And don't be afraid to try things, break them, and place them in again to get a look you're happy with. It's always tricky when you first start a build, coming up with a layout, but once you start and get placing in some furniture, the inspiration will flow. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe, and check out my Patreon if you'd like to join me on an epic Minecraft server and support me further. I'll see you in another video.